Welcome to From the Heart, a podcast where we are talking truths, taboos, and triumphs. Please be advised that this podcast may contain triggers. If you find yourself triggered by any of our topics, please reach out and seek help. Wonderful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From the Heart. We are here today with the lovely Carla Caswell, who has an incredible story to share with us today. As always, I will let everyone know that there are trigger warnings for this podcast, especially this episode. It is going to get quite deep. We are going to talk about self-harm and some other deep topics. So if this is a trigger for you, then please stop listening to this episode and go and listen to another one. If you are still with us, then thank you and welcome. And we're going to get into some real shit today. I should probably put a swearing disclaimer on this one too, because when you're talking about deep shit, when you're talking about really emotional stuff, the last thing you want to do is have to censor yourself. So if some F-bombs are going to offend you, then either please cover your ears, which would be pointless if you're listening to this in the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, then maybe have subtitles up, whatever you need to do to be able to get through. So look, we might have some laughs in this episode. We might not. Well, we do where it takes us. We go where it takes us. So as I said, we have Carla with us today, who has an incredible story. So Carla, before we get into that, please introduce yourself and tell us what it is you do.
Yeah, hi. So great to be here, and to be able to share my story. I think it's super important that you've opened a space for people to talk about these things. So yeah, as you said, I'm Carla Caswell. I am a resilience coach, and I also have a background in digital marketing for many years, working in the corporate space. So hence where the resilience sort of came out, not from my life only, but from from the agency world as well.
Yes, it's a big one. It's a big one. And it's one of those things that, I always have that surprise question at the end that I'll be asking everyone. And it is, what are your top 3 tips for resilience? I think your whole episode is going to kind of be giving little hints along the way of that.
Yeah.
But be forewarned, that one will come at the end. So look, I guess I don't know where to start. So why don't you start off just telling us a little bit about what drew you to coming on the podcast today, and give the people a bit of an idea on what we'll be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, being able to open up about kind of awkward taboo type topics that we don't feel comfortable about often sharing, and it does make us feel quite isolated when we aren't able to share these things, and potentially other people could benefit from. So I guess my story sort of starts when I was 9 years old. Um, my I had 2 lovely parents, middle class family, nothing unusual. Um, and my parents had quite a tumultuous relationship, and unfortunately it culminated one evening in my dad actually shooting and killing my mum. It was not something that was like premeditated or anything like that. I mean, I don't think I'd ever seen my dad get sort of aggressive at all. But something was triggered that evening. And I think what was difficult for me was that I was supposedly asleep through this whole thing, but actually I was awake through the entire ordeal. My dad then left the house and kind of went to um, turn himself in. I then went downstairs, saw my mom, um, and then had those normal childhood fears of I'm going to be in trouble for being out of bed and all of those sort of basic things. So, I went back to bed. Long story short, I had to end up going to a swimming camp that weekend. So off I went. Nobody had spoken to me about what had transpired that evening until I got back. So as a 9-year-old, I'm off for the weekend competing at swimming, and with this on my shoulders. And when I got home, I was obviously told that mom had passed away. But to this day, nobody in my family has actually told me what happened.
Wow.
And it actually came to a point where in my early 30s, I would say, I actually ended up having a conversation with my mum's mum, and saying to her, look, I actually am aware for all these years of what had gone on. And I think that for me really impacted my life from that moment, which I think was so pivotal, of me making that choice to not say anything when I was told about what had happened. I carried this kind of secret with me for my whole life, and a huge amount of perfectionism issue came out of it for me, where I was trying to protect my family from other people finding out, because as a kid, you don't want people's parents to say, well, you can't go around there because her dad is dangerous, or things like that. And my dad managed to stay out of prison. I'm not sure all the details because it was something I chose to not delve into. I didn't feel like it was beneficial for my healing.
Yeah.
um but yeah, I think I decided on that moment to become the perfect child, to never be a problem in anyone's life, to keep my family unit together, to take on this sort of adult role, from a very young age. And I guess that was the moment I started to also build this resilience within me, in terms of just going through life and not